Hello and welcome to this video where we will show you how to write a good discussion section for your bachelor's or master thesis. In the first part, we will cover the most important conceptual foundations you need to know. In the second part, we will present examples of very good discussion chapters whose structure you can similarly apply in your thesis. And yes, all the role model papers discussed in this video can also be downloaded directly under it. The purpose of the discussion section is to critically reflect, categorize, and summarize your results in the context of the current state of knowledge about your topic in the literature. As already outlined in Module 1, human knowledge in academia is generated through dialogue, so it's absolutely central that you integrate your thesis into the current dialogue on the topic you have written about. Specifically in the discussion section, you need to show your supervisor the practical and theoretical contributions your thesis makes to this scientific dialogue. Therefore, the discussion section can also be seen as a mirror image of the literature review, as it also heavily references the existing literature. With this in mind, the typical structure of the discussion section looks like this. First, you undertake a summarizing synthesis of the results. Synthesis of results thereby means that you summarize the various findings of your analysis and combine them into a comprehensive conclusion or overall picture. Second, you identify the key theoretical contributions to the literature made by your thesis. Third, you similarly outline the practical contributions or implications that arise from your thesis. Fourth and fifth, you can and should also discuss the limitations of your work and the opportunities for future research that arise from these limitations. The discussion chapter is clearly a chapter for reflection, making it the ideal opportunity for you to show your supervisor that you are a critically reflective individual and are aware of the possibilities and limitations of your work. We have therefore prepared a second illustration of the typical structure of a discussion chapter for you. If you wish, you can pause the video here for a second and examine the slide at your leisure. Let's now dive into concrete examples to see firsthand how well-constructed discussion chapters are written. The first example is the publication that investigated whether the number of suppliers has a positive or negative impact on the effects of supply chain disruptions for companies. When you look at how the authors have structured the discussion chapter, you will notice that it closely follows the typical structure we showed on slides 4 and 5. Specifically, they start the discussion section with a synthesis of their key findings, following the three phases in which supply chain disruptions typically manifest for companies. And yes, they also use a table 4, summary of results, to help readers understand their findings more quickly. After organizing their main results into an overall picture in the theoretical implications section, they then also discuss the theoretical contributions they make to the literature with their study. This is exemplified by the first sentence of this section, which reads as follows. Our research makes several contributions to the supply chain management literature and extends resource-based theory. First, we refine and so on and so forth. It's important for you to notice that in discussing the theoretical contributions, they always refer to and cite the current literature. An example of this reads as follows. Finally, in contrast to earlier research that overlooked the role of carriers in a buyer's supply base, our investigation introduces carrier concentration as a relevant construct to explain a buyer's ability to ensure supply continuity post-disruption. So, like in the literature section, you should therefore use citations and references to existing literature in the discussion chapter as well. It takes time to fully understand the current state of the literature, but the good news is that you can generally cite and reference the same literature in both the literature section and discussion chapter. The difference is, however, that in the literature section, you reference existing literature to show that the answers to your research question are insufficient or contradictory, while in the discussion section, you reference it to show how you are extending it. Next, under the title Managerial Implications, the authors also discuss the practical contributions or implications that arise from their research. This is exemplified by the following formulation. Our research findings offer practical implications for managing upstream supply chains. Sourcing managers should be mindful, and so on and so forth. Finally, under limitations and future research, the authors discuss the limitations of their work and the potential avenues for future research. They use an elegant strategy here that you can also adopt in your bachelor's or master thesis. Specifically, they mention each limitation of their work and then directly add an idea on how future research could address this limitation. For example, they write, likewise, our data does not allow us to examine cascading effects from one supplier or one country to another, an effect that may have been possible during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hence, future research could focus on these interrelationships among suppliers, countries, and carriers. The second example we will briefly look at is a study that investigated which elements are important in the use of artificial intelligence in the public sector and how these influence the processes there. Under the chapter 5.1, Reflection on Theoretical Gap and Theory Extensions, the authors provide a comprehensive overview of their results while also critically assessing these findings. Notice how they extensively refer to the existing literature and explain how their studies' results correspond with the findings of previous studies. If you examine the publication closely, you will see that at the end of this section they derive 3 specific propositions. You could also use this strategy in your thesis, as such propositions provide a concise way to highlight the core findings of a study. Subsequently, under the title 5.2, Theoretical Implications, they then discuss the theoretical contributions of their study to the literature. This is exemplified by the first sentence. The paper makes several contributions to the existing academic debate in an era where the literature is still scarce. Similarly, under the title 5.3, Practical Implications, they discuss the practical contributions of their study. This is again exemplified by the first sentence where they write, the results achieved have important implications for public managers and offer some guidelines that PSOs should follow when implementing AI. Lastly, under the section 5.4, Limitations and Future Research, they discuss the limitations of their work and potential avenues for future research. Note that they use the same strategy as the authors of the preceding publication by alternating between limitations and potential future research paths. This is exemplified by statements like, the study has several limitations and offers avenues for future research, or another limitation and room for further study is related to the fact that AI implementation is a moving target. In summary, for the discussion chapter, you should remember the following 3 things. First, synthesize your results and integrate them into an overall picture. Second, highlight the theoretical and practical contributions of your work. Third, discuss the limitations of your work and demonstrate how these open up avenues for future research.